I'm Ben Stoller. I'm actually the national chairman of the RPA, Reusable Packaging Association, for the last couple of years. I'm joined today by my guests Shawn, Dave, and Kevin. In terms of my background, I'm CEO of Paxxal Group and the executive managing director. I've been investing across the board in sustainable and reusables for the last 17, 18 years. We've done a lot of partnerships with a lot of companies, as well as put a lot of money to work across the board. My guest, Shawn, just go down and give a little introduction.
Sure, I'm Shawn Stockman. Not sure. Okay. My name is Shawn Stockman. I'm with OnePak. OnePak is a reverse logistics platform company. Our system is used to sort of empower companies to be more circular in everything they do, including reusable packaging. So I've been involved in the RPA for about 5 years and on the board for about 2.
Hello everyone, Kevin Mazula. I'm the CEO of RM2. RM2 is a company that pioneered the smart pallet revolution. So we put little chips on the pallets, and now we can track them and know what the conditions of pallets are as they go downstream. So it's been quite a journey for us on that. I'm the chairman to be of the RPA next year. So I'm following. I have big shoes to fill, but thanks to Ben for all the stuff you've done for RPA for the last year. We've grown quite a bit as an organization. In terms of sustainability, everything that we're doing here in this show with reusables is right down that line. Any more that we can do to expand the usage of reusables and take the trend from linear to circular, we're all for it. Thanks for being here.
I'm David Kruger. I'm the president of TriEnda. We are a reusable packaging company. We also make a variety of different pallets, anything that's going from a tier 1 to an OE, or anything that's going between warehouses and DCs is really kind of our sweet spot. So been president of TriEnda for about the last decade, been on the RPA for the last 2 years or so.
Thanks, guys. Today's panel is on the investment climate for sustainable companies using reusables and packaging systems. Right now, with the flows of money coming into the reusables and ESG, we've seen tremendous opportunities. In 2020, the flows were 50 billion. Last year, it was north of 70 billion. And people are looking for ways to put those assets to work in this type of environment. My big belief is that the unicorns that come out today are going to be from the environmental, social, and governance investment world versus the social media and search engine. That seems to have run its course. But now when we look at the power of data, the power of reusing containers, pallets, what have you, and how you can take that data and capture ways to improve the business, cost savings, et cetera, it's just significant opportunities. And you get to that zero carbon footprint, which everyone's chasing, decarbonization. You see it time and time. And it's really evident by just the sheer amount of people that are here today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. When we look at the sentiment, though, across the country, let's be US specific, then we can go global. We talk about some of the negative views towards ESG. I really think that is just a little hiccup in the space that we see right now. When we talk about Europe, 66% of the applicants actually said they were putting money into ESG, only 34% here in the US. Same thing with Middle East, Asia Pacific. However, in North America, it kind of flip-flopped a bit. You see some of the state treasurers, pensioners actually pulling some money from the large firms. And that's for a couple reasons. I think the biggest is communication or lack thereof. When you look at some of these energy companies who can produce oil and gas 20 to 40% cleaner than the rest of the world, and we still see ourselves buying from very quote-unquote dirty producers, it creates a bit of a problem. As we look at our company today, or our country today on ESG, I think it's just a blip, a little bit of a backup, but the monies continue to flow, at least I see them. So general discussion topics, I think. We're going to go around a panel here, and we're going to start with the general climate for investment as your company and companies in your area see. and how do you perform in that environment?
Yeah, I think for us, the investors that are talking to us are interested in what we do because we're actually empowering the circularity of a lot of companies where because we focus on reverse logistics, that is sometimes the barrier to switching from single-use to reusable is how do you get all this stuff back? How do you manage it? How do you track it? And I think as technology increases and you can actually get a handle on that, you can actually prove what's coming back, what the carbon footprint is. The whole technology is going to be more of a tool to justify the switch to reusables and to generate data that's quantifiable so that any accusations of greenwashing can be easily put to bed because you actually have real data. And I think that's where, at the moment, the inflection point is being able to generate data from the actual assets themselves that are tech empowered so that you can actually drive your business toward a more sustainable future. And to me, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of, an ESG rating is only as good as the data to back it up. And so, with a lot of programs out there, unless you can really quantify it, investors are not going to pay a lot of attention because the whole qualifiers that you have can only go so far. And so this is one area where the whole industry, I think, is at a point where it's shifting towards measuring a lot more of not just an ROI from an investment perspective, but from a resiliency perspective. I think the whole sustainability of a business is not just the green part, it's literally, can your business stay in business and can it last? And so it's an economic driver as much as a environmental driver.
Good. Kevin?
Yeah, I just would continue on from those comments. I think the technology is helping to drive the shift because when it all comes down to it, you still have to have a good economic unit cost. Sometimes for a usable packaging system, the initial cost may be a bit more expensive, so you need to use it a few more times to get the ROI that you spoke about.
Yeah.
If you're going to need to use it a few times, you're going to need to not lose it. So you're going to need to be able to track it and know where it is, as you said. And that's where a lot of I think the bigger trends that were helping to drive this shift towards all this investment are coming from. There's obviously the shift from linear to circular, which is just accelerating like crazy. I mean, this last year has been, a phenomenally weird year in the world, and what we're seeing is more and more people are really waking up and saying, yeah, there is change going on. We really need to focus on this zero carbon, and it's just going to continue to accelerate. That wave that you talked about, it may go up and down, but that wave is coming. Everybody's going to be investing in this space. We have to do something. And then to do it, we need the technology to be able to track it. And everything is becoming more connected. People are beginning to use blockchains more often. I mean, we don't know what we wanted to measure. I mean, I didn't know that I needed this watch to tell me how much deep sleep I'm getting every day. But now I'm saying, can I get enough deep sleep? And we're going to do the same with all the sensors that are on this thing. Like, we're going to know what's happening in the supply chain and the condition of goods as they move down. And it's just going to be goodness for the process as we drive in there. So I think I agree with you that the wave is coming.
So as we bridge from anecdotal evidence to tangible data with proving out ROIs, how do you guys internalize that at TriEnda and move that forward?
I think for us specifically, looking at what capital providers are looking for in companies, current shift is towards asset light, technology heavy from a capital provider perspective. And I think what capital providers are going to figure out in this space, we live in a pretty small world as far as the reusable packaging companies go, and the amount of, call it asset heavy companies that are out there in our space are kind of relatively few. So, for the capital providers, I think the appetite should get better for the asset heavy kind of companies. As you look at end users and you look at tracking ROI, it's, do these companies have the ability to remove an expense off the P&L and think about something that can sit on the balance sheet and they can track that return? If you can't grab the data, if you don't know where to go to grab the data, if you don't have the right software, can you at least pull it out and start to track that financial ROI and show that reuse in some way, shape, or form? And I think companies are starting to do it themselves. There are many companies that have been doing it themselves for a long time. But I think as people are trying to become more sustainable, make more money, and being a profit center does mean that you are sustainable. I think companies don't always know how to do it, and they need help from RM2s and from OnePak to kind of track those data points, and that's not something that the asset-heavy folks always do. So.
Sure. It does. When we look at ourselves as stakeholders in companies and the financial rewards, but then we have to actually start moving towards good stewards of our environment, of our world. How do you envision making that transition? I'll start, Kevin.
Making a transition to being a good steward?
Yeah.
I just think that I think people are really waking up now, and that more and more people have caught on to the fact that there is this change coming. I mentioned earlier today that I'm surprised to see advertisements now for people to go into stores and buy secondhand clothes and that type of thing. The trend, especially for the under 30s, et cetera, is already there. Using less of resources is with us, and that's just going to continue to drive forward. We talked about the ROI, and then I think there's two aspects to the ROI. There's the one where, I'm going to put the asset in place. Am I going to get the returns for it, et cetera? And can I make enough money to do that with the type of service I'm providing? But then when you look at the bigger picture of all the waste that's in the supply chain, I mean, if you were to map it out, it's just incredibly wasteful. Certain things like, the food chain says, 30% of food is lost between farm and plate. You multiply that times all the plates that we have, you're talking about billions of dollars of waste, which is bad from a money and cents point of view. But when you think about it from a sustainability point of view as well, and the pollution, all that food has to go somewhere. It all becomes gas. It all goes into the environment. That waste will, become a profit pool for someone. People that figure this out, and people that are able to connect the supply chain and make it more efficient, will be the ones that people are investing in. They're gonna. You mentioned it earlier. They're gonna be the unicorn. They're gonna make a lot of money because there's a lot of money in the whole profit pool for people to take.
Yeah, very interesting. I believe I saw a statistic that said only 5% of packaging waste is recycled. So that opportunity set in and with itself is tremendous.
Yeah, the first thing is to not use it, right?
Right.
Get rid of the use, and then if you're going to use it, reuse it. Reuse it as much as you can. And if you're going to reuse it, repair it, right? It's only at the end when you get down towards the recycling of goods, right?
And I think that really breaks down a lot: reduce, reuse, recycle. We've all heard that since we were kids, right? People are starting to reduce with data, right? If you have better data, you can reduce the amount that you're using. If you're picking the right asset, right, you can reuse. And if you pick the right asset again, at the end of its life, you can properly recycle it. And you're not always going to find that perfect balance between the ability to reuse it for the longest period of time and recycle it on the other side. But as long as you're making the right choice for the life cycle of your program or whatever your goods are, you can reuse and recycle efficiently or properly.
The thing is, I think, the change is going to come whether you're prepared for it or not. And I think part of the transition is also policy driven. If you look at extended producer responsibility laws, about 17 years ago, the electronics industry started with EPR laws around computer components and any kind of consumer electronics, which is kind of our sweet spot. We've been doing that for 17 years, starting with the great state of Maine, where I'm from. They did the first one, and then now there's 26 around electronics. This last year, Maine was also the first one around passing extended producer responsibility for consumer packaging. Now there are 5 states that have that. There's 11 more with legislation pending. It's just a short hop from there to get to transport packaging and the producers of pallets and crates and bins and totes. Ultimately, I would say 10 years down the road are going to be just as responsible for all that stuff as consumer packaging producers are now. And so you're either going to be ahead of that curve and planning for it, which is where investors want to be, or you're going to be a victim of it and scrambling to catch up and figure out how you're going to meet the regulations that are coming. So I think at least the ones that we talk to, the investors are looking at where are you in the mix of that policy transition, and are you going to be an opportunist and be ahead of it and be in a position to actually make money from it and prosper from it, or are you going to be on the backside getting crushed by it?
Right.
And so as policy moves, I think that's going to draw the producers into the transition, whether they want to be or not.
Right. The way that we look at it internally is an alignment of regulatory policy with opportunity,
Right.
with long-term feasibility, pushing it forward. When you put all those into a blender, what is that opportunity there? And at least from our experience, the investment capital is tremendous. Do you see that in your business as well?
I don't think we see it as much. Again, I think as people are looking at the asset light transportation, reusable packaging companies, they get excited about that asset light nature. And the reality is the asset heavy folks are the ones, again, look around the room, there's not many. And most of us dominate this entire industry. And so I think when you start to be a capital provider that's coming in and looking for the right company, you're not always quite sure what assets are even the right assets that are getting reused. And I think it's sometimes easier for people to wrap their head around maybe the technology side and where to invest their dollars on the technology side, because they can more tangibly see the returns than understanding why this pallet is better than that pallet or this container is better than that container. And the answer is really, there is no perfect pallet, there's no perfect container, but usually there is the right pallet or the right container or a couple right pallets and a couple right containers. And I think if we start to see more investment dollars turning this way, at least for the companies that are here, there's just not very many. So, the inventory is rather light when you look at where to invest those dollars. So longer term, if we look 10 years down the road, the legislation turns the way that we're talking about. I grew up, water's warm, dive on in. We've seen a lot of companies that just haven't made it in this space. And there are a lot of companies that have been around a long time that continue to make it in this space. And those are really good assets as far as from an investing perspective, where to put those dollars.
Along that same vein, you see some of this anti-ESG sentiment picking up and some pensioners pulling money out. What would you say to those investment professionals, or do you agree that will continue to happen?
I think from my point of view, people are confused as to what the standards are for ESG. I mean, the Reusable Packaging Association, the three of us, the four of us sitting here have commissioned a study to try and help us wrap our heads around all the ESG standards that are out there so that we can publish that back to the RPA as a whole. And I think that's the hard part. Am I actually being a responsible investor when I'm putting money into these companies that are calling themselves ESG friendly? And the reality is, I think people just don't know if that's the right place that they're putting their dollars. Does that make sense?
Right. And from a publicly traded perspective, if you have to provide these metrics, what does that do for the benefit of the investor? Kevin, you guys are traded.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on the point. I mean, it's hard to find the right benchmark and the right thing that everybody, like you said, am I doing the right thing? Am I going the right direction? And where a lot of people come to in the end is, what is my carbon usage, or how much of that am I doing, and people are buying and trading that. And I think that will continue. That will probably continue to flow down into that carbon measurement. But like you said, there's a myriad of different standards and policies on how we get there. So it's confusing for people. I think that's kind of why we had some kind of the background. But I think if we just look at it philosophically and going back to if we can use less to start with, that's a great place to start. If we can reuse stuff, that's great. And picking up from your comment on legislation coming in, I was in Europe 20, 30 years ago when Greenpoint came in, where you had the manufacturer had to be responsible for their packaging, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I don't need all that packaging on this. What was I putting it all on there for? It's just a waste. And now people are saying, I don't need all that packaging.
Right.
And the same is coming. I hadn't really great point. The same is coming for our industry, and we would be all, well advised to consider some of those changes that we know are on the plate.
Yeah, I think the real challenge is that, if you look at the ESG reporting frameworks out there, there's, CDP, GRI, SASB, there's a bunch of them. None of them at the moment have any measure around reusable packaging. It's one benefit of this association having an active voice in trying to help them understand the benefits and how to measure what it means to make that switch. And so I think at least two of those are merging. So at the moment, from a reporting framework perspective, it's the Wild West. And I think some of the reluctance that investors have is, okay, so I'm going to invest in this company. How is your services going to filter into your clients so they can report it to GRI or SASB? And at the moment, there's not a great linear line there.
Right.
I mean,
No, absolutely, because they're paying a green premium for the company, and is that green premium paying off at the end through the results of the company?
And can they evidence it?
Yeah, correct. And by the way, for everyone who doesn't know, on our website, reusables.org, we did a fantastic study on ESG. We really want to be the go-to resource for any information that you may have on implementing ESG into your company. And you can talk to Tim as well if you need to find it. What I want to do is open up the stage to questions that the audience may have, just so we can address any concerns that are real time out there. If that's okay.
Only easy questions.
Only easy questions, okay. Any questions out there? Softballs, anything? Somebody has to have a question.
We must be really interesting.
Yeah, right? Okay, so, I'll throw a question out. We were talking about role of technology in the capture of data and how that is going to proliferate. I could sit here and talk for hours about that because I think that the voracious amount of data the large volumes of data that's provided to the voracious appetite in the investing world is huge. And how do we monetize that? But love to hear your input from that. Sort of.
I think there's, if you look at the whole spectrum of ESG, on the S side, the social side, there's very little quantifiable data on the social impact of making these kinds of changes. On the E side, there's a lot of data, and it's kind of a ripple effect where the low-hanging fruit is emissions, where you can now, if you can track the whereabouts and the path journey of each of these assets, you can really track the reduction of emissions both in the production of the single use that they're replaced, but also you can use the data to drive efficiencies that's going to further reduce the footprint of operationally of the reverse logistics. So the easy part is the quantifiable emissions part. The tough part is sort of the byproducts of that. And that's where I think it's going to be really interesting to see, okay, it's great you can measure the reduction in the emissions, but what does it mean for the efficiency of your business overall? The fact that you can now, measure the dwell time, let's say in the food industry, this shipment of food was in one facility longer than it should have been, and the temperature while it was there was higher than it should have been, or the humidity was higher than it should have been. You can go to that facility, tweak it, and you can tweak the entire supply chain as these things move through, because now you have access to data that can tell you all kinds of information that gives you an opportunity to make your business more and more efficient and therefore more and more profitable. So to me, that's the value of that is not just in now we can measure emissions, but what else can you do from a business resiliency perspective that has a whole bunch of other kind of side benefits.
Yeah, I would just echo that as you're going down, again, repeating, as you're going down the supply chain, there's a lot of inefficiencies. If you're able to know where they are, people used to say in advertising, right? I know that 50% of my advertising budget's well spent, the other 50% is not well spent. I just don't know which one it is. A lot of that's the same in supply chain, right? I know it's not efficient, but which part of it's not efficient. Now we can measure it, we can start to see it, and then if we can shorten the supply chain by 1 day, and that means you got 1 day longer on the shelf. That's fantastic. You know, 1 day extra shelf life is huge. So I think we're in a time where we're going to continue to be able to sort out a lot of this waste. Part of the challenge will be in how you measure things, because you can now measure every nanosecond, right? You can say, I know where my product is every fraction of a second.
What are you going to do with that
Yeah,
information?
well, exactly. Do I want that, or do I want to measure it once a month or something?
Right.
And so, you know, and the energy, you know, how do you, part of, you know, these sensors and IoT is all about energy management, and energy management is how you're communicating and you know, trapping, you know, using the electricity for the signals to transmit that data, and people have to make a lot of decisions there in what time periods they're going to do things. I think it will really come, and also the accuracy, and I think it will come down to people be looking for 2 types of systems. One is kind of an overall macro one, where it says, yeah, I know it's going the right direction, that truck's on the road, this is going okay. And the other is really micro within a framework, saying, I know exactly what shelf it is, exactly where it is, what you know, the temperature is when it's on that shelf every minute, and so that I can eliminate it if it goes bad. But it's still not clear. Nobody's got the perfect data system to say, here's how we manage it. But that's the beauty of this industry. It's a fun industry because it's wide open for innovation and for, you know, for success and making more money.
And for us, we get presented more with tech than we deal with tech, right? So we see a lot of different technology companies bringing us different solutions. And I think he hit the nail on the head. Do you want the macro or do you want the micro? And I think as technology continues to grow, you'll see probably firms that are more focused on the micro, technology companies that are more focused on the micro, and others that are maybe more focused on the macro. And that's, you know, how much data do you want, and when do you want it, and what frequency do you want it with? Because the problem has always been, how much battery life does it have? How big is it? How do I attach it? There are a variety of different issues that come along with all these different types of technology, but there are also a lot of really great solutions and data that can be used well to help reduce and reuse. So it'll be interesting, at least for us as somebody who attaches tech rather than plays with it. It'll be interesting to see, you know, how that technology continues to grow over the next 5 to 10 years.
Very good. From the importance of having entrepreneurs looking for capital and capital available, and the name of this panel really is Investment Climate for Sustainable. I've never seen it stronger, and truly believe that the innovators that are helping the world decarbonize are the next unicorns, and they will be the guys driving the next evolution in this marketplace. And I'm sure you guys all agree as well.
I think as you look specifically for us, and you look at the rest of the industry, the shift to EV is going to change the automotive supply chain across the board. And for those who have been focused in the auto space, if you don't have EV solutions and you haven't been making EV packaging for the last 10 years, you're going to be very behind. And I think as people are starting to realize how much packaging this shift in drivetrains is going to take, you're starting to see people say, well, who makes packaging for that? If we're going to spend $1.2 trillion on batteries by 2030, who's going to move it around? And I think people are starting to wake up and say, okay, who are going to be the winners and losers on the backside of those businesses as the tier 1s and tier 2s to that industry? And do we want to be in front making decisions before things happen, like he was talking about with regulation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the way to quantify it is to be able to show the tangible results, not the anecdotal, but the tangible results that's acquired through data collection. So when you look out and walk the space, you see automation, you see integrating automation with your CRM, integrating with your supply chain system, integrating in all those benefits that come through, ESG statistics. But at the end of the day, the guys who are there first and innovate are the guys who will be very, very successful. And I think that's who, at least the folks who are walking around here, are putting out the dollars for this. And even though we see the negative sentiment somewhat in the news, I just think that's a blip. It's going to continue. It'll disappear, and everyone will continue to put money into this space. Any questions? Any questions? Somebody? No? Okay, I think that's a wrap. Guys, thank you so much. Always
Thank
great
you, Ben.
seeing you
Thanks.
guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you, audience.